All right. Let me see. You're in the party. We're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready to party.
Ready to party. Glad to hear. Give it. Hello, Jamie. Welcome to my school of teaching StarCraft 2.
Kevin, thank you. Content creator Kevin, I'm happy to be here.
I'm glad to hear that. So, I'm just gonna tell you one more time. You already know, but everyone at home, we're gonna be doing a couple of weeks where I'll be teaching Mr. Jamie some StarCraft 2. Right now he's around 5k MMR, so very close to Grandmaster. We'll try to get him as far on the Grandmaster ladder as possible. And this week we're going to start by teaching him one good build in every matchup. And we'll work from there. We'll improve on top of those builds. We'll add more builds once I believe that my pupil is ready. But until then, we're going to just start with these three. And it's three of more standard builds. No all-ins, just macro focused. Are you ready, Jamie?
Excellent. I'm very excited. Let's go.
Glad to hear.
All right, I've never seen this map before, so I'm ready to learn.
How long have you not played? Like five, six?
Probably, man, it must be 3 or 4 months at this point. I've watched some tournaments though, so I have seen this map. I just haven't played on it.
All right. Are you aware of the meta currently, or?
To some degree, but honestly, you're gonna have to fill me in.
All right. So let's start with PvT. It's a fun matchup at the moment, and it's kind of focused, especially in Korea, around blink openers, I think. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna be doing one of the more economically viable blink openers with lots of scouting. Like it's actually one of the perfect macro builds. If you play very well with this build, you're gonna win a lot of games, and that's pretty much the goal.
That sounds like a good goal.
Do you remember the core first opener, how to do it?
Yep. I seem to remember when I first started playing, I opened core first, and you were like, no, that's bad, don't do it.
Yeah.
I came back just the other day, and then everyone was doing core first, and I was like, I knew it this whole time.
yeah. Core first is maybe slightly better. You see,
is that just to get the unit up before the Reaper?
Yeah, so the main advantage of core first is just you get your adept out before the Reaper is there, and it also allows some map control. So there's a long period where you basically have no real scouting info over your opponent. But with core first, you can at least get some kind of information, which is nice.
Nice. Is it still pretty standard to scout after gateway?
Yeah. Usually you scout after gateway, you check to see if everything is okay. If everything is okay, you just continue with this build order as follows, which is like, so it's basically just a core before Nexus, so like 20 core, 20 Nexus, 20 pylon. You open with adept, warp gate. Obviously you also get a second gas after your pylon. And then once you... this is the kind of stuff that happens a lot. Like this map is insanely small, so the Reaper is here slightly earlier than usual. But usually what you want to do is you right click on the Reaper and you shade on top of the Reaper once. So most of the time you get 1 or 2 hits. And then after you do that for the first time, you go across the map with the adept for your scouting, maybe some harassment, perhaps you can force a bunker. And then you get a stalker at home and you like chrono that, and then you get the twilight.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's not too much different than what I remember for what I used to do. But that sounds good.
Yeah, I think a lot of the builds haven't changed that much. It's just good to get a refreshment, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, definitely. And so, is it pretty standard to get the gateways up front just for Hellion in case there's Hellions? Is that still?
Yeah. So usually your initial wall is like something like this, like the gateway cyber wall. Like you want a wall of an area where the Reaper can jump. A lot of maps have an area like this where you can just wall it off. Then you get your stalker out, your second gateway, and then you get a second stalker. Now, in this case, if his Reaper goes back home, you just kind of follow the Reaper with your Stalker, right? There's no need for your Stalker to be at home if the Reaper isn't trying to get into your main base. So you kind of have to play that by ear a bit, you know? Usually, like, if he moves back with his Reaper, then you go with your Stalker. If he stays close to your base, you stay with your Stalker at home and you just scout with your Adept. Just see if anything odd is going on. Check if it's a Hellion, Widowmine, sometimes Cyclone first.
Okay.
follow up after the second gate is a robo. So you play second gate, second stalker, robotics facility. And at that point, because you played such a fast cybernetic score, your warp gate should finish. And you just warp in a sentry and get a nexus. Basically at the same time. And the sentry is there for scouting in case your adept doesn't get full information. You can use hallucination scout and you warp in a third stalker as well. And this is basically the early game that you're going to be looking at. From like 2 gates, third base, robotics facility about to finish up. And you should have some kind of idea of what your opponent is doing with your early adept. Any questions, Jamie?
Mm-hmm. Are you playing it much differently if he goes gas first versus barracks first?
Not necessarily, because the timing of your warp gate is so fast that you're gonna have units pretty much regardless of what he's doing. You know, you're gonna have units ready. Perhaps unit positioning is slightly different, but gas first is so uncommon at the moment because score first, like, just allows you to put on so much pressure to your opponent. If he gets gas first, his Reaper is delayed, he doesn't get a Marine before reactor, that usually you will just be able to do so much damage that his gas first actually gets almost delayed as much as if it wouldn't be a gas first, but just with worse eco. So a lot of the time it's kind of okay for you.
And so this is off, you get the third nexus off of 2 gates, that's right?
Yeah, 2 gates, 2 gas, and then once you're done once you build a nexus, you can take a third gas after you're warping.
Lose 7 probes, I can do that.
Yeah, just write that down, alright?
Yep, thanks.
That one should...
I've already memorized that one.
You've been doing that for years.
I've been doing that before Zest was even born.
You learned that from me.
Learned it from the best. Okay, so hang on, I got a couple quick questions.
Yeah, sure.
If my alarm goes off.
Sure. What happens then?
Sorry, no, hang on. If you were going for Hellions, like reactor Hellions, what would you be making a wall with? Would you be putting a third gateway down, or would you be using the robo?
The robo, yeah. I'd use the robo, and you can use like a pylon in that case, you know, just for some extra support. So basically the pylon that's now in the main, you could use that for that, yeah.
Gotcha. Definitely. And then the next thing I was going to ask, which you might be about to explain, is what are you doing for like how many observers? Because like I remember the build that I used to do would go robo for Twilight, and you get like 2 or even 3 observers, and like this one is a bit later, and you're using the hallucination to scout. So, what are you going for with
so initially, our observers are really just, or our robo is really just initially to make sure that we have detection in case it's Banshee, right? And our main use for scouting will be hallucination, and then afterwards we can get like 2-3 observers to cover like the major areas of the map. You know, like preferably the areas that are hard to reach or hard to cover with units. So I'd say 2-3 is fine, but don't sweat it, you know.
Gotcha.
No, yeah, 5-6 observers, that's pushing it. Just be a little normal. Like the main info is gonna come from that hallucination and the initial adapt and perhaps stalker poke. Now we're gonna kind of differentiate between a couple of scenarios that you can find here. Now, right now Zest scouts the 3 racks, right? After just a standard 1-1-1 opener. This is kind of common at the moment. Like this is one of the very common things. Obviously, it's gonna be fast stim, fast combat shield. He's gonna hit at like 620, 630, you know? And you gotta have units ready for that. In that case, what we do is we basically continue on 3 gases. We get charge, we get a forge, and we get up to 8 gates at around 47, 48 probes. Okay?
Okay.
This is like a pretty specific worker count. It's because we're fighting against a pretty specific timing. Now,
is that usually that you go 46 probes, you build the gates, and then you resume making probes afterwards?
Yeah.
Goes to the third? Okay.
Yeah. You kind of keep rallying to the third. Yeah, after you have like a slight probe cut of maybe like 20, 25 seconds, maybe even less, where you add like 5 gateways, and then you continue rallying onto your third. Most of the time, what you do is you get up to like 16 workers on minerals on your third. So I guess that's 57 workers total. And then once you kind of stop their first push, that's when you continue workers again and you see their third base, you know? You don't want to go up to 5 gases if they're still on 3 racks.
All right.
Makes sense?
Makes sense.
All right. The other option being that if he plays triple command center opener, then you can go wild, right? Like it's a party for you. Like you add a second forge. You can, I don't know, just chrono boost your probes. Like your life depends on it. You add gates whenever you have money. You'd never probe cut, and then you just go up straight to 5 gas, maybe even a 4th base before you even consider doing any kind of probe cut. Let me think. Yeah, right. Another thing, if imagine you with your initial Adept and Stalker Scout, and then afterward you see something like Tank Banshee, and there's no 3rd CC, that could mean that he's doing a push. Like if there's no extra barracks. So it'd be like a Marine Tank Liberator push or a Marine Tank Banshee push. In that case, what you want to do is you want to walk like 4 Stalkers on the map and kind of just meet him head first. You know, just kind of poke his Marines, shoot at them one by one, and then kind of micro back towards your base. And once you're close to your base, the Stalkers that were microing, they kind of swoop around this army and start cutting off reinforcements. Okay? You get an Immortal out, and then once you feel like you have enough, you kill him. If it's Banshee, get a battery per base, and you should be safe.
I was going to say, would you ever get batteries at the front or at the 3rd for any of these pushes?
Maybe 1. At where you think you're most vulnerable.
Okay, but it's not like a necessity. It's just kind of...
Yeah, don't make it a habit.
Okay.
I think. Of course, you know, not. I also thought that Nexus before Core was better, so not sure how much value my opinion.
I'll do some research on the 5K NA ladder, and I'll get back to you on how it's meant to be played.
All right. The way that Zest plays is with plus
why
1.
Is he getting, I was gonna say, why is he getting plus 1 attack?
Okay, so the style that he plays specifically is that it's kind of base trade focused in that he gets a prism very quickly and he defends any kind of push with Sentry Stalker. So he holds key areas. Like at the 3rd, he holds near the rocks. At the natural, you know, there's the rocks as well. And then as he's holding that key area, he will be going into his opponent base with Zealots. And his main goal is to do as much damage as possible. Like he's not really planning on receiving any damage. In theory, there's only going to be able to get a couple of units in, you know, so attack upgrades make more sense. Now, you can decide to do this, but I think this style requires a lot of skill. So perhaps for you, it's better if we stick to the
wow.
If we stick to the armor for now. It's a style that is a little bit easier to execute. And as you come from a long break, like I wouldn't say something like this, you know, if you'd been playing all the time, but it's a long break. You know what it does with someone's mechanics. So
yeah, sure. I'll just be a bit rusty. I'll follow your advice this time.
Yeah, a little rusty. But I'm sure by next week you'll be playing attack as
next
well.
Week.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'll be in this replay playing against who's here? Dream,
yeah, for sure. In the Oli Molly, you could do it.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Can I go first?
Okay.
All right.
I guess this is your show.
This is my show after all. I think you should, instead of the prism, you can probably it's better to get an immortal. It's slightly more safe. And I think if you're gonna survive, majority of the time you're gonna win the game anyway. Once you see a 3rd base, by the way, I wouldn't mind adding like a 2nd forge and the extra gases. That's kind of the early game plan here. All right, you go.
Okay, I was gonna actually say I noticed that you got 3 observers and a warp prism. I was gonna ask, do you get any immortals with this? But I guess you kind of answered that question.
Kind of answered that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but the setup he has is pretty good, right? Like with the observers right now, he has good vision, the tower. You can even get like a pylon where potentially your fort would be, something like this. I think from here on out, like the main idea is to either defend the first push, or you can go into like fast 5 gas and then you go into storm. And then you kind of start playing a mid game with a charge lot Archon immortal based army, where you can have storms either just with your army or in a prism. Once your fort base is up, you can start transitioning into Colossi. That's kind of the general plan, but I think for now, this should be kind of sufficient, right? Like, we don't want to get too theoretical.
I gotta say, like usually, like when I play games and they look somewhat like this is like kind of a middle game setup that I like getting something kind of like this. I find that like if I stop the drop or don't take much damage and then like the push comes and I just like win easily, then I feel like the rest of the game kind of plays itself. But I find the most trouble, and I guess we'll see how this replay goes, is when like the drop kills like like 7 probes like this, or like 4 probes,
sure.
And then like the push comes and I hold it off, but like I only have like a sentry and like a few stalkers left, and then I'm like, ugh. I don't really know what the follow-up is to that.
Yeah, I think the main idea with this is that because even if you play with more charge lots than Zest does, it's still good to get 2-3 sentries just to be able to hold those chokes in an easier way. And if your early game is a bit whack, you can just add a couple more stalkers, more immortals, rather than going for zealots, where zealots is a really good army composition if you're trading a lot, right? Like if you're in a good economic position, but if you're slightly behind, like you can't really micro zealots in a way which make them a lot more effective. So there you can kind of add more stalkers, more sentries, and perhaps your gas count is a little lower and your tech will be slower, but it's easier for you to stay alive if you have only ranged units against his only range units. Like you're always going to lose zealots if you engage, and that's
right.
That could be a way to kind of get out of the crappy situation, I guess.
Okay, that makes sense. And then like so right now he's just kind of making immortals and more units, and then taking his gases and making more probes and archives, I guess.
Yeah, that's basically the goal. So he has like his sentry count, his immortal count, then he just adds a Templar archives, and I think it wouldn't be a mistake to add a second forge here. Like I think it would be quite wise, just to get a slight head start on that upgrade. And like I said, once you feel safe, I think you should add a prism, because this kind of move with the zealots in the main, is insanely sick. Even if you don't do any damage, it forces the Terran to rally at home, which is already kind of a big deal.
Yeah, and looking 2 places at once, I feel is super big too.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Yeah, that's not easy, the 2 places at one thing.
No, I can't do it. Not yet, anyway. I can't get 2 monitors set up.
All right, I think the rest of this game isn't too interesting, I think. And
I think this all makes sense, I think, from here.
Yeah, I think it's just the early game, I think, is kind of important, because the rest of the game kind of plays itself out. Just be sure to be on top of your transition. So either into... so usually you initially go into Storm, and then into Colossi once you have you get your 7th gas or your 7th and 8th gas, You can really start affording double robo Colossi transitions.
I have another question, which is kind of I feel like some people watching might also benefit from this. Is I find even say at my level, sometimes you get players who they do exactly the same build that Dream did, and then they just don't attack, and they just take a third really late, and they never push across the map. Maybe they try to do a drop or 2, but they just move their army to their third, and that's it. What would you do in that type of situation?
Well, you kind of play the same, because you're just in an economically better position than your opponent. He played 3 Rex before triple CC. Your 3rd Nexus went down way faster, so your eco is just better. And like I said, the moment you feel safe, you just throw down a fort base and a second forge. And then he's just behind economically from the start, and he's going to remain being behind economically. And in PvT for Terran, it's very important to keep map control when they play 3 Rex. The moment they lose map control, basically what you do, imagine he's staying at home at this point. You just, I wish I could ping, but it isn't working for some reason.
Okay, use my imagination.
Yeah, so the bottom base that he has, you can just park 4 zealots there. You put a prism in the dead space above his base, and you just keep a zealot on every path that leads towards you, basically. And then the moment you see him move out, you run in everything. So you're running the zealots into his natural, you drop the prism into the main, and you have 2 more zealots going into the third or something like that. That either forces him to return back home, or it forces him to be completely all in. And while you have that set up, basically you're safe to do whatever you want. You have the whole map under your control. You can take a fort base, extra gases, and then once you have an army where you feel like you have a little bit of an edge. So imagine you hit a power spike timing, like your storm finishes, for example. You can be okay, time to fight. The moment he stays at home, everything happens on your terms, which is a big thing.
Okay, that sounds good. And then say for me, what would you recommend for a general later game composition? Because I feel sometimes in these games, the trouble that I have is I end up getting stuck on too many gateway units as the game gets longer, and then my army is just kind of bad. Would you be going for disruptors or High Templar and a prism, or
I'd usually say the initial one is you get High Templar and a prism, and then as you build your fort base and your 7th and 8th gas, you build your robo bay and a second robotics facility, and you go into 3 colossi, and after that you just keep adding more and more disruptors. That's the whole play.
Okay.
A cool little trick, by the way. Sometimes these losers that keep building Vikings, like you build 3 colossi, and these guys they have like 15 Vikings. Yeah. What you do is you can either kill your own colossi, or what I like to do is I hide my colossi like at my 3rd base or something. And then they're like, oh, there's no colossi. They land their Vikings, and then the colossi come in. Something like that, Nice. So try to play a bit with those stacks, like switching around. Disruptor is very good in general, but it's always nice to have some colossi initially.
So now I'm just sort of imagining like those, like the tournaments where someone's like making a bunch of battle cruisers in the opening versus Zerg, and then like 25 minutes in, the battle cruisers are like flying through to the 7th base, like picking it off. Now I'm imagining like 3 colossi come in from the bottom left corner, start zapping larvae and mules that from
start harassing that base. Yeah, actually, there once was a game I played in a TESL once. This was the Taiwanese Esports League, and there was a game there with. Do you remember Sase?
That's definitely a familiar name. Is it spelled S-A-S-E? Is that right?
S-A-S-E, yeah, Swedish Protoss player. And he played against Vanilla, which was a Taiwanese Terran. They played on Frost. And Sasa had this trick he did a lot where he would show Colossi, and then he'd kill his own Colossi and just go pure Gateway army and like Immortals and everything, right? And genius. So you force like a lot of Vikings. Oh, this was 2013, so we weren't that bright back then. But you forced like a lot of Vikings. And then he played a game against Vanilla on Frost, and he shows the Colossi, but Vanilla wasn't paying attention. So Sasa kills 6 of his own Colossi without Vanilla making a single Viking.
That's just strategy, man. That's just good game sense.
Worked out well.
Brilliant.
You actually still won that game, if I recall correctly.
Oh yeah, good for him. Yeah, I wonder why. If your opponent doesn't notice 6 Colossi, maybe you might have an advantage.
Yeah.
Okay. Am I exiting this replay?
Yeah. PvZ or PvP?
PvZ. Let's do PvZ.
PvZ. All right.
I don't like that one.
I mean, we get everything in the end. Like it's,
Yeah, that's true. I just want it now. I want to know.
That's allowed, man. It's allowed. It is one of my own games, so I know very well what happens here.
Yeah, we set this one up before the recording started.
Yeah. Everything prepared.
All right.
So, in PvZ, what do you know? What's your instincts tell you right now?
My instincts?
Yeah. What do you think?
How I would play it? Or
how would you play it? Your primal feelings towards this matchup.
I'd be thinking like 2 oracles into a 3rd base and then robo, or I'd be thinking like make a bunch of adepts, or I'd be thinking Archon drop with Dark Templar.
Okay. So everything except the final part is fine. The Dark Templar drop is dead. We killed it.
Oh, that's sad. What happened? Is it just people figured it out, or is it bad?
Yeah, the glaive build is so much better.
Yeah,
it's like the DT drop just seems so bad in comparison now. It's probably still a kind of a viable build, but the glaive build is so much better that it almost feels criminal to be playing that one.
Okay, I did always feel that adepts were super strong. Like when I was playing, I was like, wow, you seem really good. Like whenever I watched Neeb, he was winning so much with it, and I was like surprised that no one else was doing it, but. I remember that you had like the Dark Templar and Adept build, and I guess it's pretty common now.
Yeah, there's like a slightly better variation, but for now, because that one is gonna make you win games too easily, and we wouldn't want it to be that easy, would we now?
No.
So I'm gonna introduce you properly to that build next week or in 2 weeks from now.
Okay, excellent.
But for now, we're working on your core.
It's just gonna be every time we play, my rating's a little bit lower. We get more and more desperate.
We end up cannon rushing. All right, maybe this is a bit too difficult for you as well.
You get new Protoss players on every week to see if they can help me.
Yeah. Today we have Zest, Showtime, and Neep
trying to help me figure out how to play the game.
So we're actually going to be doing the double oracle into a 6 adept poke. So it's not super, like it's not an all-in adept poke. It's more like, hey, are you only building drones or do you also have some links kind of poke, Just making sure that the other guy's respecting your presence. as a Protoss player, which Zerg sometimes forget to do when they only hold down the drone key. So
very true.
It's kind of standard, just double Oracle. You produce 4 adepts from your initial gateway.
Oh, okay. I like that.
We don't really care about scouting at all. So this Overlord that's here, it's like, yeah, good luck. You can see everything you want. Like, we really don't care. And try to sync up your second gateway with your warp gate finishing somewhere around that time. Okay?
Okay.
Then you get a third base at like 4 minutes before you take the gases. So it's just like standard 1 gate expand into 2 gate, Oracle, 4 adepts from your initial gate. Now, you can do some harassment with the initial 2 adepts. You can lose them. That doesn't really matter. But you can also just go back home and wait for 6 adepts and then go on the map with those. Then in combination with your 2 oracles, you should be fine. Now, after you warped in the 2 extra adepts, you get the robotics facility, the double gases. Make sure you have enough pylon. A pylon at your third base as well. And keep a probe in the wall over here until you can warp in like your next warp in, whether that's sentries or zealots, something like that.
Is there any significant probe cut that goes on around this point?
No probe cuts really. We're continuously building probe.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't really need to do that, but if you really like money like I do, then yes, that's fine.
Yeah, big money.
Big money,
big views.
Big money, big views, big gamer. And you too can be a big gamer.
Is that your new slogan?
You can big money, big views, big gamer. Yeah, could be my slogan.
Nice.
So yeah, this is like the kind of tricks you can pull. You shade into the natural, and then you pretend to target
you
drones.
lose all your adepts?
Yeah. No. This is part of the pretending, and then you fly in with the oracles.
Ah, yeah.
And then you this is the kind of flyby. So you always kind of want to go where the queens aren't. So you trick the Zerg by shading into a really crappy position with your 6 adepts. He's like, oh, 3 adepts. Jumps on it with the queens, and you kill 10 workers with your 2 oracles. That's kind of the play. All right?
That's a move. Yeah.
So lots of pretending there. If you think you can micro your 2 oracles, then just leave all your units alive. And I don't know, just kind of walk around, maybe deny some creep. But I mean, you should be able to. You don't even always finish the shade. If you see like 30 links, you could be like, that's a lot of links. Perhaps I'll just stay under my oracles. But if you see like 6 links, you just finish your shade, you hold position, and then you just focus on your oracles, killing stuff at a different base, basically. All right?
Okay.
Now, behind this, you warp in some sentries at home. You get Forge and Twilight, and you get 1 Immortal.
Okay.
And then you just start adding gateways. After you have 4 gateways, you can add the gases on your third base. And then you kind of set yourself up for a very standard charge load Immortal Archon mid-game, where the emphasis isn't so much on Immortals, but more on Zealot Archon majority of the time. And like Prism Harass, slightly faster Storm perhaps.
So how many gates do you have right now? You have 4 and you're adding a 5th? You say you go up to 6? Is that how many?
No. Like, so initially I just go up to 4. Then I take the gases on my extra base. Right. There's of course a little bit like, if you see your opponent is building 25 roaches at this point, we can skip the gases and throw down a couple of batteries, yeah? Like this is kind of the point where we're scouting with our hallucinations, with our oracles trying to gain some info. Like this is the info gathering time, You got the Stone Age, you got the Bronze Age, and the Info Age. And that's kind of... that was really bad.
And then you have your Harstem, right?
I'll edit that out, don't worry.
All the jokes that don't land, just edit.
Yeah.
I actually am not going to make an appearance in the final cut.
Where was I? Oh, right. And then you just go up to like 9 gates or something like that. 9 gates, you got your +1, your charge, your Templar archives. And kind of the way it works is that charge and +1 line up, and your gates with finishing. And as you move out with like 1 Immortal, a Prism, you build a fort base, basically. And as you're moving out, you get your +2 upgrade, and you get your Storm started. In this game I get 2 Prisms. This is when you're feeling that your opponent is building a lot of drones. You don't really need extra Immortals. Like if you're being all in, you don't get a Prism, you just keep building Immortals. But if you feel like he's building drones, you see a fast fort base or something like that, you just get 2 prisms, 1 prism with your army, and you send 1 prism like over here or something like that. And then you move out, And as you're moving out, you get a fort base. Once you're +1 and your charge finishes, you get +2, and you get storm. Now, one of the rules that I like to hold to myself is that you don't get more than 2 Archons before researching storm. Mm-hmm. And this game I have 3 Archons before researching storm. So it's not the best example, but usually this is the... It will have to do, yeah. And yeah, I mean, usually 2 Archons, I'd say, and then storm. It times out pretty nicely. It leaves you with a little more gas. Any questions?
Yeah, I'm kind of like curious because I feel like this general structure makes a lot of sense. I feel like when I play and I have sort of this general theme going on, the thing that I struggle most against is when I feel like mutas wouldn't be so bad because you open Stargate, but say like Swarm Host, is that still popular?
It's a little less popular, but it's fair to ask about, of course. Well, the thing with Swarm Host is that the trick really is to find, like, if you're playing Swarm Host Nidus, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you kind of want to find the Nidus. So you have 3 air units initially. Like, after you build your +1 in charge, I forgot to tell you, you build the Phoenix. Mm-hmm. If you suspect, usually when I see a roach opener, I get like batteries around 650. But if I see Hydras, I don't get them. Just in case of Muta. And if you think it's roach Swarmos, you have like 3 air units to cover a lot of area. So you can put like 1 Oracle patrolling here, 1 Oracle patrolling here, a Zealot here, 1 Phoenix patrolling here, and you can get like a Void Ray or something to descend into this general area or whatever you want.
Yeah.
You get 2 prisms. Yeah, go ahead.
2 prisms, okay, go on. Yeah.
Yeah, 1 prism with your army, so if your units get surrounded by Locust, you can pick them up, and 1 prism on the other side of the map, and you don't even really need to use it. You just keep 2 Zealots in there, and if you think a base is vulnerable, you can drop them, but try to not lose them. You don't want to be spending too much money on dropping Zealots. Just try to keep some roaches busy, basically, on the other side of the map. That's kind of your goal.
That, like, the Zealots being faster, like, kind of makes it easier to defend overall.
Yeah. Yeah, and mainly good at catching Roach Ravager stuff. Like, if that's ever out of position. But in general, it's still the same. Like, the same, you get 2 Archons, you go into Storm. The only thing is you delay your fort base, and instead of a fort base, you just add, like, 3 cannons at your third and 2 or 3 batteries, you know? Like, maybe 2 batteries in your natural, in case you ever lose that. Like, most of the time what happens is you can't deny every Nidus, right? Mm-hmm. Well... Some people can, but usually I assume I can't. So
usually they just end up inside my base. Assuming that's not the case.
That really shouldn't happen. So you kind of use the Phoenix for that initially, to make sure your base is cleared and stuff like that. Have pylons everywhere, and then what you do is you just make sure with your air units that you cover 1 area, which should be this area. Like here, there should be no Swarmos coming from this. Because your natural is difficult to defend. Your third base is where all your static goes. You know, your batteries, your cannons. So that's just kind of where you want to...
Gotcha.
Yeah, where you can defend. So it's okay if a Nidus pops up here, you know? Like, you can defend that at your third base.
And then say, what composition would you be going for against that? Just like Immortal Storm?
Slightly heavier on Immortal than I'm doing right now, but... The rest, just the same. So you get +1 in charge, and then afterwards, with +2, you start your Storm. You get a slower fort base.
I was going to ask, too, the composition you have now against just the Hydraling, is that, do you just get that 1 Immortal that you got earlier for safety, and then you don't plan on building more until after this attack? Or what's your thought process on Immortals? Yeah,
so the thing with Immortals is that they're kind of an investment in the future, which I'm not sure how you are at financial management, but in general, I think that's a bad idea. Usually you want to be spending your money as quickly as it comes in to make sure, you know, you live your life to the fullest. And that's kind of what you do with this as well. Like you get 1 Immortal because you have to, otherwise you just die all the time. But then afterwards, like, it's better to have 3 Zealots immediately than to have 1 Immortal later. And Immortals also really cut in your gateway count. Imagine you continue building Immortals. Every Immortal you build is basically 2 gates that you can't build because they're 275 minerals. So initially, you don't want to build them too much, but you see during my push, I'm already getting an extra 1. Because I feel like I don't want to warp in too much more here. Like, this push is really just to clear some creep, And if they're pretending really hard, you know, if they have like 85 drones and 5 bases, 10 gas, it's like, all right, buddy, quit it. It's the guys that at the end of the game, like they call themselves the ultimate macro player. You know, it's like, all right, buddy.
Right.
Yeah, okay, no wonder you won. It's like I can also win with 3 Nexus before gate, but that doesn't count.
Okay, gotcha. I guess while I'm still asking those questions, what would you be doing against Mutas? Would you just be getting the batteries like you were saying?
Yeah, batteries, add a cannon, continuous Phoenix production. The moment you notice it, which sometimes could be once they hit your base. If that happens, just warp in, cancel all Immortal production, and just warp in Stalkers ASAP, you know?
Okay.
Just warp in Stalkers in the base that's under attack, and just go hard on the defense. Against Muta, you can take some damage, you can delay your fort base. Don't spread yourself too thin. Just make sure everything is secure, and then start thinking about a fort base.
Sounds good.
Glad to hear. So, +2.
appreciate the coaching.
It's all good. +2 storm. Extra gases on the fort. And the moment you move back with this, what you kind of want to do is you just put like your zealots into this prism. And similar to what I just said in PvT, you kind of, like with this, you just got map control. So I take the tower, and then whenever I see him move out, I have 2 prisms that I can send in at any given time, basically.
Nice.
I can't remember that I actually killed this base. That's one hell of a play by me. No, I go back. But yeah, this is kind of what you want to be doing, except, oh, you don't want to lose the prism here. Oh, very fast. That's nice. And then from here on out, the goal is kind of to wait till you get +2 and storm, and then you shoot it. Wait, why are we laughing?
Sorry, I was just watching the war prism.
Did it die?
You just flew it right back in.
This happens to the best, alright? This happens to Neeb as well. Stop laughing. I thought maybe he would be going with the Hydras. A little bit naive, perhaps.
That's okay, you got the second prism coming in.
Yeah. This is also a little bit opportunistic, right? Like the warp-ins, if your opponent is not on the map, it's like, it's kind of too easy to deal with majority of the time. You're just throwing away units. I'd always suggest like you keep building, or you kind of keep them there until you get attacked. And if you don't get attacked, you just push with Storm and +2 with 200 supply. And unless they have Brood Lords, you win the game. And if they have, if you see a very fast hive, you just get like I do right now, Fleet Beacon Stargate. And basically once you push out with the push that I just mentioned, with like the +2 finishing, you take your 5th base as well. So you take the 4th when pushing out with +1, you take your 5th when you push with +2, and you get the Stargate and the Fleet Beacon. 2nd Stargate and Fleet Beacon. And then you basically have your general setup for any kind of game. You got your early game covered, you got your mid game covered, and you got your late game, well, potentially covered by going into carrier, that kind of stuff.
I was gonna ask, would you be going into carrier pretty much all the time, and not like carrier Tempest or carrier Void Ray? Or what would you be thinking?
Yeah, I'd just say carrier for now. Like, there is some situations in which Tempest are good. Like if your opponent has very little creep, and you've been kind of in control, but they don't quite, like, you can't kill them with just a ground push because they have Broodlords very fast, then getting Tempest is good rather than having to play a long macro game with Carrier. Because Carrier kind of allows the Zerg to get back into it, right? Like, it's such a slow transition. Tempest is a lot faster and puts on more pressure. So sometimes Tempest is okay, but in general, I always recommend most people to play Carrier because it's just slightly easier. Maybe in a couple of weeks, you know, once we're back on track.
Okay. Once we get past the 11-minute mark in my games.
Yeah, exactly. For now, most of your games should just end with this +2 push, I think. But it's the fake, you know, the 5th base and the Stargates. So if he ever presses the rewind button, he'll be like, ooh, he was macroing really hard. And that's kind of the effect we're going for. All right?
Okay. Yep.
Anything else, Chief?
Not really. I just have a kind of a question. I feel like every time that I make one Phoenix, I always end up like flying him around the map because I really hate how a lot of Zerg players just have overlords everywhere. Like they have vision of everything. Would you ever do that with that one Phoenix, or because they have overlord speed, it's kind of not worth it? You just better off patrolling over by your...
I sometimes do that, but most of the time they fly their overlord away into a pack of Hydras, And my Phoenix has the same destiny as my Prism had. Just kind of dies. Like, if you're fast enough for that, then go ahead, my friend. But it's not for me.
Then I'd be
look at this Prism
doing the coaching, I guess.
Big power. Actually, thought I was gonna die again. Glad it didn't. But yeah, this is kind of the plan. And then you push, you do the micro, and you should win the game. All right.
How about getting a mothership? Do you ever get a mothership? Does that kind of go with the carrier thing?
So if you do a Tempest push, you can get it like very fast, and sometimes you want to do it with just a ground push, but majority of the time, it's kind of like once you're taking your 5th base, you can start that bad boy, or once your fleet beacon finishes. But it kind of delays your push, right? So most of the time, the +2 push is intended to hit pre-Broodlord. If you can't hit pre-Broodlord, then mothership might do the trick.
Okay. Are you ever going 2 Robo?
Yeah, usually against Lurker, you should be playing 2 Robo. But instead of playing 2 Robo this game, I decided to go for carriers. Which I can't remember quite how it works out, but it seems unlikely that I show you a game that I lose. So I think I'll win this game.
Yeah. Well, if it looks like you're about to lose, we can just quit the replay before that happens.
Yeah, we'll do that real fast. I mean, I don't think the rest of this...
You can edit it out in post.
Yeah,
you can put the victory screen.
Victory screen at the end. Yeah. Adobe Premiere, thank you very much.
Expertise.
Nah, this is alright. Yeah, against Lurker counts, you want more Immortals. Against Banelings, you want a higher Archon count and like 5-6 Templar for Storm. That's kind of the max you want to get. And then the rest should be kind of irrelevant. Like the rest is just based on run-bys, counterattacks, and most of the time the TOS army is just stronger, but we can't really attack because they're on creep. So yeah, just keep that in mind.
This looks good. I like this whole playstyle.
Glad to hear. All right, let's pop into our final thing. The PvP.
Okay.
Nice.
I'm really hoping that the replay is like 4.5 minutes long, and I'm like, oh.
Proxy Robo.
Finally a good strategy.
Finally a good strategy. No, we're playing some macro, I think.
All right.
Well, it's like it's a little bit of both, right? In this the problem here is that there's no real solid macro opener. So I play the most solid macro opener there is, but with a bit of a trick. And I
this sounds like a cooking show. It's just a solid traditional recipe, but with a bit of a twist.
Bit of a twist.
All right.
So this is a game I played recently, and I kind of like this style. So you open just a standard double gate opener. So gateway, gas, second gateway, and then after your second gateway, you scout a part of your map and you proxy a pylon. But you're not actually going to be using the proxy pylon. It's like it's a fake, basically. So I'm scouting for cannon rushes here. I'm making sure I'm not being proxy gatewayed or something like that. And then you put the pylon, preferably on your side of the map, which makes it harder to find.
Okay, I was watching Drogo. Sorry. Okay.
That's okay. It's okay. I mean, we do the same opener.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You get your cyber core.
This is the same opener. All right.
Second pylon, except my pylon is closer to my base.
Okay.
I do 16 on minerals at all times.
Yep.
And then I just start rallying into gas afterwards. And you just basically the theory here is if you see a scout at your base around like 145, you know that he's scouting, and most likely his second pylon is at home. Because it can be a proxy if he's scouting, right? Like it's not really possible. So in that case, you try to enter his main base around like 215 or so with your probe. But if you don't get scouted at all, that means your opponent is most likely proxying, and your life is going to depend on whatever this probe in the top right is going to do. Like if he manages to find a proxy, that's good. Then you know what kind of proxy it is, and you can try to counter it. If he doesn't find the proxy, I found that the best way to deal with it is to pretend that it doesn't exist. So,
okay. Yeah, I feel like this is when I scout Spire in PvZ.
Mutas are not an option here. No, but really, like if you don't find it, it's like you can gamble, but you might as well just be a little greedy, you know, just play standard at that point. So at this point, I think I find this proxy, and I scout like the whole top side with my first probe, and then afterwards I use my stalkers to scout like the close by location. So I'm kind of excluding the very aggressive option, the close by proxy robo, basically the proxy gate. I want to be able to exclude as well. Like I should be able to scout the whole map with my first probe and the stalkers, at least from those two threads. Mm-hmm. And then really all there's left is either proxy oracle or a fake proxy, or like some weird DT stuff. But quite frankly, that's terrible. So that's none of our concern. You play Stalker, Sentry, Nexus, low ground pylon, and then you can follow up if you... well, depends a bit what you see. This time I saw a proxy gate, so I follow up with Stalker. But usually I would follow up with Sentry. Then a robo in my main base, or well, a battery first on my natural and a robo in my main base. Mm-hmm. If you don't find this proxy, you want to be getting a battery in your main base at around 3 minutes. Just in case it's proxy oracle. And that's kind of the opener.
Isn't it hard to get a... Oh, no, yeah, because I was going to say you don't have a pylon because you proxied your second pylon.
Yeah.
But I guess you built a third one.
Yeah, third one in the main, fourth one downstairs. So your battery is a little late. It's not an ideal situation, obviously, but this is mainly powerful against people that scout. Well, it's powerful against everything. Like, it's a very standard opener, but it's also very powerful against people that scout. Mm-hmm. And then go like, oh, he's proxying. But you're not really proxying.
Did you chrono either of your first two units? I wasn't paying attention.
No, but I put one chrono on my warp gate.
Okay.
Then you get the robotics facility, and this is like kind of reactionary, right? If he doesn't have a nexus, then, well, like if he's doing an all-in like this, you need to keep going. Usually, by the way, after I'm done scouting part of the map with my probe, after a while, like once my two stalkers are out, I'll send my probe into his natural to make sure it's there or not. And then you can respond accordingly. If you see no natural, you might want to add another battery in your natural. If there is a base, then, go a bit harder on probes. And then your hallucination scout from your fourth unit, which is the sentry. So you get stalker, sentry, or stalker, sentry, stalker. You get a hallucination the moment you can. Unless you know what your opponent is doing, then you don't need to scout. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's kind of the early game theory. If you're being attacked, keep warping in units, add batteries, but try to not cut too much into workers, basically. Especially if they have a nexus, because then all of a sudden you might accidentally be behind, and that's never nice. Mm-hmm.
Are you... Say after you hold this off, are you often proxying because see, if I had your probe, I'd be like building a pylon on his side of the map. So I feel I just do that all the time, but is that sort of unnecessary?
Wait for 3 seconds and we'll find out. I'm pretty sure I built a pylon in this game.
Okay.
It's like for adept, right? You mean? Yeah, like it's nice if it's there already. You don't have to do it because a lot of the time you're already winning at this point, right? If you hold something up, like I'm up 7 workers. So in a way, it's exposing me to unnecessary risk. But on the other hand, if it works, you're even further ahead, which is great as well. So it's like, you can do it. Don't do it every time, I think. But it's not bad to throw in. So yeah, I throw it in here. Yeah, there it is. But in general, your plan is to go into Forge Twilight after and go into Charge. Charge and M+1, basically. I think I do a 4-gate push here, which fails absolutely. So I kind of run into the same issues that I had, like that I have with the Adepts, like I don't need to do this. Like this could win me the game, but this also could get him back into it. So in that case, it's kind of unnecessary majority of the time. So in that case, I wouldn't recommend this kind of play too much.
Is this the kind of thing where you would ever push the front with because you have so many sentries and just kind of like poke a bit, force field a bit, but then just like drop either Immortals or Adepts with the Prism in his main while you were at the front? Or is that just a bit too fancy?
No, that's kind of what I'm trying to do now, except instead of already transitioning, I built 2 extra gateways, which is the part I don't like too much, the 2 extra gateways. I think usually the best play is, you can do a fake push, Of course, the thing you need to pay attention for is some kind of adept run by, you know? A lot of the time when people are behind, they'll try to do an adept run by onto you, and if you're moving out on the map, that can suck. So be a little careful with that kind of stuff. And don't lose your prism. I almost lost my prism here, that would have sucked.
Nice moves.
Yeah, nice moves. And then in general, the rule, of course, is to go on to 44 workers, plus 1 in charge, and if you're ahead, try to kill your opponent. And if you're not ahead, try to keep your prism on their side of the map, and when they move out, go in with the prism. Do some counter damage, and then try to hold one of your bases with the help of batteries.
What's your response to, say, a 2 base, they have 2 gas, like adept all in, maybe with an
immortal or 2? Yeah. Try to get... so main unit should kind of be the stalker. Try to be wary of getting your own adepts and your own zealots. Don't really get those. Just try to get some stalkers, maybe an Archon, and get like 6 batteries and a cannon. And just go hard on that, basically. That's gonna be
what eventually do you get that will mean that you can like beat his army?
Archons.
Like Archons?
Yeah, Archons is the deal breaker, basically.
Okay.
But yeah, that's a very rough build to deal with. But Archons is the thing that gets you in the end to the win.
Nice.
And then from here, like, it's kind of a... It's a weird game, right? Because you're playing Archon Immortal Zealot against Archon Immortal Zealot majority of the time. And your game plan usually is to either try to kill or try to not be killed. Try to do some counter drops, try to do some counters with Zealots, or try to do some counters with Adepts like I'm doing right now. But there's not much I can tell you as like a general plan. We'd really have to go over situations that you play where you weren't sure what to do, where I can give more clear advice. For now, it's just try to not build too many probes, 44 probes, then try to fight. Always continue upgrading until you get +2. And that's it, basically. Like, that's PvP. The early game is very important. Control is very important. And yeah, that's it, really. Like, there's not much else you can do.
Yeah, that sounds good. I feel like most of my PvP games, like, if they go mid-game or later, I do pretty well. It's usually I lose to some, 2-base push or some dumb who knows what.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay.
Any more questions, Jamie, before you go into your adventure?
I think I'm ready to be set free.
Ready to be set free?
The wild world of the North American ladder.
North American ladder. All right. We'll keep track of your process. Will you be streaming it somewhere?
I might be streaming it on Twitch. Casually explained, but also might not be. see how it goes. Don't get your expectations too high, but also,
it might be there. All right, sounds good. Is there something you want to plug? I believe you also have a YouTube channel yourself.
Oh yeah, I have a YouTube channel. It's called Casually Explained. Make sure you check it out.
What do you do there? You make you draw stick figures, right?
Yeah, I draw pictures.
Draw pictures, all right. So it's an animator. Really, that's cool.
I talk about them. Yeah. It's an advanced PowerPoint, really.
Yeah, it's kind of accurate. Nice. All right.
Yeah.
Well, glad you were here for this. I'm looking forward to next week to, take a look at your progress. I'll try to write some jokes beforehand that might land. And
yeah, I got to work on that myself. I didn't have a script ready for this whole event. I felt out of my element. But yeah, thank you for having me on. Harstem, I enjoyed this coaching session. I feel like I am hopefully going to be better next time rather than worse, but we'll see.
Glad to hear. All right. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you next time. Bye-bye.
See you later.